And now to introduce our next plenary speaker, we'd like to invite JALT President Richmond Stroop and JALT Junior Program Chair Mary Beth Kamibepu.
Good morning. Thank you all for coming. We're introducing the JJ Plenary speaker together because I wanted to highlight the fact that JALT Junior is part of the Teaching Young Learners SIG, and one of the jobs within the SIG is putting this event, the JJ event, together. It's part of the SIG job. Like, this is our big SIG event of the year. And we couldn't do it if we weren't completely integrated, seamlessly integrated with the rest of JALT. So we say it's kind of a conference within a conference, but from the beginning, from publicity to reading the proposals, it's all one. It's part of a whole. So a lot of people have asked about that, and I kind of wanted to highlight that because when Richmond and the committee, we all get together and we think of the JJ Plenary, everybody helps us. We're a SIG. We can't afford a lot of finding great speakers like Judy. She comes with everybody's help. She's gone to Hokkaido, Nara, done lots of outreach just in the last 24 hours, 48 hours that we've all been here. She's reached out to our SIG and members. So this is our big event, as it is everybody's big event. So to highlight that, we're together, and now Richmond will talk about Judy, who's been a wonderful plenary speaker and friend to our SIG, in more detail. Thank you.
Good morning. I feel like I should have an envelope and an award to give out. I'm very happy to introduce Judith. We first met, we have both been involved with TESOL International for many years. We started working together on the Standing Committee on Standards, and we did quite a bit of work. Judith has a lot of experience with accreditation for programs in the United States, teacher education programs. She also has a tremendous amount of experience with teaching associations, and her experience is with California TESOL. And because of that experience, we also worked together on the affiliates task force with TESOL International. So we have a long history together. So when there was the opportunity to invite her to come to my university to be a visiting faculty member on our Masters in TESOL program, we were very excited about that because our faculty doesn't have anyone who's a specialist in teaching young learners. So this was a wonderful opportunity for us. It was a wonderful opportunity for us to work together with the SIG. So it's been very, very beneficial all the way around. She's also the author of a textbook, or not a textbook, but a book about working with students with interrupted formal education. And when I was trying to think this morning about what to say about Judith, I actually took a look at what one of the reviewers said about her book. And I'll just read that for you with just a bit of paraphrase. So the compassion that Judith and her co-author feel for our SIFE students, the commitment they have to educating them well, and the comprehension they have of the assets these learners bring to the classroom are evident in the writing, tools, and vignettes they share. I would add to that their compassion is also evident in how she teaches and how she works with the students at my university and the students that she works with. So it's my honor and privilege to introduce my colleague and friend, Judith Olafin.
Give me a second to change PowerPoints and do my little thank yous as well. Here we go. All right, from the start. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the conference chairs for all the help they've given me and the invitation. It's really, really appreciated. Anne and Trina, and meeting Trina in Nara was wonderful. Mary Beth, it was wonderful meeting you. I adored sitting at the table yesterday for teaching young learners and talking to people who came by your table in the exhibit hall. Okay, yeah, that's right. I guess over here better. Okay. And if Mary Burkett is in the room, I couldn't have gotten anywhere without Mary's help. I got lost a number of times, and she was wonderful, and she arranged the Four Corners tour. Richmond, it's been wonderful working with you and learning from you. And finally, there are some of the students in the audience who are in my class, and you have actually enriched my life, and it's been really a wonderful experience. So thank you all very much for your help. Okay. Is that good, like this? Okay. Now on to my topic, 3 strategies for fostering learner resilience, and I'm going to go through and tell you what I'm going to talk about. First, here's the overview. I'm going to first introduce the topic with a bread sandwich and some vignettes about 4 different learners, and definition of resilience and the factors that impact the ability to become resilient. And I think this fits into your theme as well about recognizing the diversity of your learners and finding a way to include them and strengthen their resilience and their ability to learn despite some obstacles that are in the paths of many learners, whether they are English as a foreign language students or English as a second language students, or they are native speakers in building resilience. We all know that we face times where we need resilience to move forward. I'm going to look at the education and environmental factors, including a little piece about ACEs, which actually is very US-based research, but just a little bit. We'll look at a resiliency wheel, and then the big piece is I have, I am, I can, a growth mindset, and then coming to conclusion. So the first piece is about a bread sandwich. The first person, the actual person who identified resilience was Norman Meze, and he died in 2009 of Alzheimer's before he had finished all his research. He was a developmental psychologist and clinician at the University of Minnesota, but he had observed this young boy, one of his patients, who got up every morning and made a sandwich to go to school. And this sandwich was made with just 2 slices of bread and nothing in the middle. He packaged it nicely, went off to school every day with a smile on his face. And Meze kept wondering, how could he do this? His mother was a known alcoholic. She, they lived from hand to mouth. The father had left them. Yet he had a positive attitude about his life and going forward. And Meze discovered that he was part of a cohort of children that he would identify as being able to succeed even despite their difficult circumstances. Meze would identify this quality as resilience, and he was the first person who named it, and he's credited with being the first to discuss it and observe it and explore the issues of resilience. So here he is. And he found that other researchers were looking at kind of the idea of the glass half empty. And for him, it was the other way around. The glass was half full, and they were able to succeed. The resilience research before this, although not identified as resilience, was really on the negative life events and how negativity could really impact your life and and kind of cut you off from the development of a full functioning person and being vulnerable. So he looked at the protective factors, the what in the subject's background helped them to succeed, and in spite of challenges. However, he unfortunately never able to finish his research. Following him was a woman named Emmy Warner, who had a longitudinal study in Kauai From 1955 on for about till the students were in their 40s, she followed the 638 children who were born in Kauai and monitored them for stress from in utero through poverty, through family problems. And 1/3 of these students were able to develop through stable backgrounds, while 2/3 were considered at-risk learners. And so the stable group were able to become academically proficient. They had social and domestic success. The at-risk group had serious learning problems and behavior problems that started at the age of 10. There were delinquency records, mental health issues, and other difficulties by the age of 18. So she was trying to figure out why this stable group developed resilience while the at-risk group did not. So what she found was, what set these children apart and what predicted the ability to be resilient, which we could all use in terms of helping our students become resilient learners. Most of the students developed a bond with a strong, supportive caregiver, whether it was a parent, a teacher, or a member of the community. And their response to the environment was developed based on this support they had, this kind of help that they could reach out to. They could then feel positive about themselves, and they could also seek out new experiences. And what she discovered that this 1/3 group were not gifted and talented. They were not specially gifted. They were just a range of all kinds of learners. And they had this internal locus of control that they believed that they could make changes in their own environment. It was their ability to achieve. But the other thing she found was that resilience changed over time depending upon the stressors that some of her students faced that she was studying. So how one viewed an event. Does the adverse event become traumatizing? How you frame the event to make all the difference. And looking at adversity as a challenge rather than something that defeats you, you become thinking of yourself as becoming more flexible, able to face the situation, move on and learn from it and grow. So thinking about that, that particular way that this group did well, and this is from Bonanno and Siegelman, they followed up on after her research. And so if one frames a potentially traumatic event as a threat, it becomes an enduring problem, and one becomes more inflexible and is negatively affected. And I think when we think about our own lives, we think about different kinds of things that have happened to us in our lives that are challenging ourselves. And when I was in Nara, I told the story of my father, who was one of the first 50 people to receive artery bypass. He had 3 months to live, and unless he had gone to artery bypass surgery, he would have died. And so I had 2 really young children, and every day I drove from my house in New Jersey at the time to Montefiore Hospital in the Bronx with 2 little girls and crayons and coloring books. And I thought about it, and I thought about it recently when reading this research was, well, I could have looked at that as, poor me, this is a terrible experience. My father survived the surgery, will he live? And my poor kids are sitting in a waiting room coloring pictures, and every day for weeks because my father was in intensive care. And then I thought, well, it was a learning experience for me and a learning experience for them. And I was challenged to face this because I was able to do it. And I think that's what happens with a lot of the kids that build resilience. They look at it from the glass half full rather than the glass half empty. So we're going to look very briefly at 4 vignettes. These are 4 stories about, what becoming resilient and how some become resilient and others don't. The first one is this boy, Abraham. This is a true story of a boy in New York City, and it's in the Educational Leadership magazine from September 2013. He was in 9th grade, and he met his English teacher, Miss Laurie, and she immediately connected with him, and she helped him adjust to the school in New York City, to help him navigate the requirements to graduate from high school by passing the Regents exam, to complete his college application process. And she listened and shared all the emotional challenges he faced. So what factors helped him become resilient? He was actually, I'll go back again one more time, he was actually targeted by drug dealers and others on the streets in New York. He was a Muslim in Muslim dress. He was trying to navigate living in New York and also going to school with girls and boys, and just the youth culture of America was such a challenge to him. So Abraham was able to succeed because he was able to share his emotional challenges of being a newcomer with Miss Laurie. And he said that Miss Laurie, anytime any kind of problem happened, I always had her to go to. And she helped me a lot from 9th grade to 12th grade. And she's not my teacher anymore, but anytime I need something, I can reach out to her, and we have a lot of trust. So thinking of yourself as the Miss Lauries out there to the various students that you work with. Ricardo's a whole different story. And there are many stories like this that we, in the United States, we see. He was a 15-year-old boy, and this is not Ricardo, but this is a composite of Ricardos from Honduras. He attended school for 4 years until he had to quit to help his mother work on their farm. His mother was killed when he was 12, and he moved in with an uncle. When he was 14, he was threatened by a local gang member and told that he would be shot if he didn't join. So Ricardo's uncle paid a coyote to help Ricardo escape and make a dangerous journey across Central America and Mexico to be reunited with a father that had left them when he was a baby, and he had never met him really. After 8 months crossing the border, he was captured, and he spent 2 months in a detention center until he was finally sent to Wisconsin to be with his father. Life with his father was not really great. The family, you know, he didn't know this family. The father had remarried, had children from the second marriage. And finally, they had to move him out. The uncle moved him out and moved him in with another relative in another state. And now he's attending school and attempting to adjust to his new environment. So you can see the difference between Ricardo and Abraham in terms of the support. Although both had support, one had more support and more involvement than the other. The other two are really based on videos. I don't know if any of you have ever seen from Diversity Source, My Brown Eyes. And the other one is Live and Become. And that video is based on a true story. My Brown Eyes was written by Jake Ho, and it's available. You can get it on video, and it's a good piece to use with your teachers. This little boy who did not have a name in the video, you meet him, and every morning he gets up very early. He makes his own breakfast. He makes breakfast for his parents who have worked all night in a restaurant. He leaves the breakfast for them. He goes off to school. And so he has the resilience in his home environment, but when he gets to school, he has a different name than the other children in his school. They tease him and make fun of him. He gets into a fight on the playground and ends up sitting in the principal's office and waiting for the principal to decide what to do with him, but he can't answer her. He doesn't have any English. It was his first week in school. And so, unfortunately, his parents are called to the school, but before they arrive, his classroom teacher talks to the principal and explains that this is his first week of school. So he has the resilience at home, but he doesn't have anything he can hook onto to build resilience in school, and needs to work on that. This one, I actually met the actual person this story is about at a video preview in Berkeley, California. So this is a boy, Shlomo. He's an Ethiopian boy, and if you have memory that goes back to 1984, Israel was bringing many Ethiopian Jews to Israel. And this young boy had a Christian mother who actually lost her life. She was very ill and died in the refugee camp. And Then he was sent to live with a Jewish family in Israel, and his mother's last words to him were "live and become." So similar story to the little boy in My Brown Eyes, but in this case he had a lot of support from the family in Israel, who finally discovered that he wasn't Jewish. He didn't know anything about Jewish life, but they accepted him, and they helped him succeed. So, successfully develop resilience or not, and these are 4 different vignettes to think about in terms of the students you work with and the challenges they face. Okay, so here they are, the 4. Abraham, Ricardo, the boy in My Brown Eyes, and Shlomo. So how do we define resilience? Well, here's one definition. To be a resilient learner is to be able to recover from negative events or feelings and cope with challenges and adversity, and tend to yourself when there are challenges to one's well-being and self-image. So to have these attributes, resources, and skills to recover. And finally, here's another definition. Oops, I went too far. Okay. It's also fostering and strengthening that internal and environmental protective factors, the kind of bread sandwich we all have in our lives that we do with what we have, and we make it positive. And I think about that a lot in terms of my dad and those stressful times, and feeling guilty that my children were sitting in a hospital when they could be out playing with friends. But in talking to them now, and they're in their 40s, there is not one negative thought about whatever happened to them. So it's how you build that idea of looking at the positives of what you are doing. So here are some of the educational factors that affect resilience. Peer pressure, working with students, particularly middle school and high school students, and even university students who feel the pressure of succeeding, the pressure of fitting in, the pressure of looking like everybody else, the academic rigor that they face, in some cases a language barrier or building the second language as becomes more difficult for them. My particular area of work recently has been on interrupted education, and students who have had interrupted education due to a number of factors. And my co-author, Dr. Brenda Custodio, and I continue to work in this field and looking at what's going to happen for these students who have had 2 or more years of interrupted education. And so that may be something you might see eventually, or maybe not, but interrupted education is a big piece of what affects students. Grades and grading, testing and test scores, the graduation requirements that are stringent, and motivation, keeping your motivation going even when you face obstacles throughout your learning process. The other thing that I looked at also was there is a cycle of failure, and please feel free to copy this. I'm on an OELA grant in the States at Ohio State University for training teachers in several areas of this country. One is Washington, D.C., another is a school district in Texas, and a school district in Columbus, Ohio, that has a lot of refugees who live in this one particular neighborhood. So in attending a session and meeting with the other people who are working on this project, we looked at this cycle of failure and where should support be offered to break this cycle. So there's an attempt made, and then there's failure. And then comes frustration based on the failure. And then comes avoidance. And very honestly, I can tell you about avoidance since I've been in Japan, avoiding to say names of places and names of people that I can't pronounce. So I say, you know that person. So I've done some good deal of avoiding, so that's on my guilty list. And so the instructor not noticing the lack of understanding that the student presents, because sometimes they hide it really well. And the fear of failure on their part is, so they hide all of this and they blend in and they open their book and they look like they're reading and they look like they're following. And I've had students I've even had adult learners in adult education who I never knew didn't know how to read because they could mimic what a reader would do in terms of opening the book, following along, pretending to write something down, etc. So they then reach the point where they're unable to practice their learning and they've made no improvement because there hasn't been any intervention at this point. And with that comes the loss of self-esteem, kind of what probably is happening for Ricardo as he moved from home to home to home, and the loss of motivation, and then a feeling of being isolated and finally giving up and dropping out. So this cycle, this is where you all come in terms of helping your students become resilient, is to be able to break that cycle in different places and to be aware, to kind of have your radar up and be aware of the needs of the students. The other piece of this is related to, and there are more slides for this, but if you're interested, I'll tell you where you can find them or I can send them to you. The Kaiser hospitals in the United States looked at what they call ACEs, the things that affect longevity. They were noting through studies of length of life that how some lives were cut short. And they were trying to figure out what was the impact that made their lives get cut short. And so they came up with 8 ACEs. And among those 8 ACEs are some of these: poverty, involvement, someone in the family, not necessarily you, but involvement with drugs and different kinds of drugs. Could be alcoholism, could be illegal drugs, could be prescription drugs. Physical or emotional neglect from childhood. And immigration status is another piece of it, and that's a really big piece in my country, but also elsewhere where there is fear of coming out and going to school because you may be deported. Bullying, bullying is a very hidden piece that, again, is hard to detect, as is not being able to read, because a bully really knows how to cover his tracks and bully others. So bullying in an environment, homelessness, self-esteem, and lack of opportunity, both economic and social, and discrimination, facing discrimination in the environment where you live. So you can see from this tree, there are adverse childhood experiences, the acronym for ACEs. And they've been they studied up until around early 2000s about the ACEs, and then they realized the ACEs are still continuing to impact the lives of many children in the United States and other countries. At a migrant conference this last year, they talked about migrant children facing the issues in ACEs and how it will affect the longevity of their lives and may affect how they die early in their 40s or 50s before, people are living into their 90s. So if they have a number of these ACEs, 3 or more of these factors, it will impact their longevity. So that's another piece of all of this at looking at resilience. So here's a resilient piece that I think is really important. We're going to look at the internal and can-dos of the student for resilience and the teacher in classroom resiliency wheel. Usually I move around, so I have to stay right here, and it's a little harder. So this tree grew out of a rock in this lake, and to show you visually what resilience looks like. So the internal factors that might help resilience are the relationships you build, the service to others, the helpfulness from others to help you become resilient. And I'm talking about the you here, but I mean the you in terms of the populations that you work with of learners and how to help them become resilient. It's an inner direction as well, and life skills. It's a sense of humor, and I have another little story about my dad that really sticks with me. When I was in college, I worked 2 part-time jobs, drove to college. I drove to college in the morning, went to class after driving around and finding a parking space, came home, took a quick nap, went to one of my 2 part-time jobs. One was in a shoe store and the other was in a theater on a mall, and where I sold tickets for plays in a place called the Playhouse on the Mall. And then came home, had some dinner around 10 o'clock, went to bed until 2, got up at 2 o'clock in the morning, went downstairs to the basement. My father had a workbench down there, did my homework. Then took a quick nap around 5, got up around 7, ate breakfast, drove back to college, and over again. And I came home from school one day and said, I've had it, this is it. You know, I get up every day, I go to school, I find a parking space, this life is terrible. I go to the shoe store and I answer the phone and I go, where am I? I'm at the shoe store or I'm at the Playhouse on the Mall. What do I say? And then I come home and, you know, and then I get up in the middle of the night and I do my homework while everybody's asleep. And my father looked at me and he said, you have a lot of problems, right? I said, yeah, didn't you hear me? I have a lot of problems. This is, you know, this is not fun. This is not the way to go to college. And he said, well, what would happen if you were dead? And I looked at him like, are you kidding me? What would happen if I was dead? I said, I'd be dead. He said, yeah, then you'd have none of these problems, right? And I said, yeah. He said, so be happy. That means you're alive. You have problems. You're facing your problems. You're dealing with them. Enjoy. So the final thing about him was that my mother asked me to help plan a 65th birthday party for him. And I went to, well, first we were going to make it as a surprise, but that wasn't going to work. So I went to him and I said, what would you like on the banner? And he said, 65 and still alive. So the sense of humor is really important because it helps you face some of the adversity that you have, whether it's a flat tire on your way to work or a lack of money, or you leave the house and forgot your car keys, or like me, I keep losing receipts everywhere, and or I missed the train. I've missed the train a couple of times now, and so you have to have a sense of humor to go on. A sense of inner direction, and I think that what he said to me about, you know, you're facing this adversity, but you have inner direction to succeed. And actually that helped me get through those 4 years and then onward into graduate school. When my children were in middle school, I went to graduate school after working during the day and then going to graduate school at night and then teaching an adult class on the nights I wasn't at graduate school. So that was my inner direction, and that was something that he helped me with, his humor, a perceptiveness about, you know, what your goal is and what you're hoping for, and a sense of independence. And your positive view on your future, being flexible, your love of learning. I think that's what's kept me going all along, is I still love learning. I love learning from other people. I love attending conferences. I think everyone in this room does. And so how do we instill that in our learners? Being perseverant and your self-motivation, and understanding that you have self-worth. These are all important factors in building resilience. So onward to this model. So first we have 2 wheels. One is the focus on can-dos, the resiliency for the student, an emotional awareness, a response to circumstances. Emotional awareness is to know when things are starting to get you and how you respond to them. Organizational ability, a social support network, helping those students create a network, a sense of humor, which I really still think about the 65 and still alive, and wish I still had the sign somewhere that I could hold on to and keep forever. Self-belief, I can do this, adaptable and flexible. And so that's from the student's point of view. This is from someone named Nan Henderson, and the whole issue on September 2013 is devoted to resilience. And Nan Henderson called this, what teachers can do, she called this the havens of resilience. And actually this wheel is on Google Images, easily downloadable, and you can look at it. And if you look at this wheel, you see 2 pieces. You see the support for the learner, and you see the challenge to the learner. That the challenge is that you're setting high expectations. You're not leveling off at where they are now and how they will learn up to this point, because they have potential and they come to you with a whole array of experiences that they can bring to the learning challenge that you are presenting to them. And to dummy things down or to stay at one level really does them an injustice. So you want to provide both care and support, but at the same time you want to set high expectations for the learner. You want to increase bonding and pro-social bonding, but you want to set clear and consistent boundaries so that they are, you know, that you're the good cop, bad cop kind of thing, or the good mom, bad mom kind of thing, where you're supporting the learner, but you're also challenging him. So you're there for support, and as Miss Laurie was for Abraham, and the family in Israel was for Shlomo, supporting him. I mean, coming out of a refugee camp, being Christian, and suddenly having to practice Hanukkah, Passover, the Jewish New Year, and Yom Kippur, all those holidays that he didn't know anything about. Okay, so this is the piece. Developing a plan, the I have, I am, I can model of resilience. And this was developed by a woman named Edith Grotberg, and it was meant for actually native language learners. And she talked about native language learners and how to support them in their learning so that they could develop resilience. And she called it the I have, I am, I can model. So from the student statements, looking at it, I have means that I have resources and people available to me to offer me support in school and in my community. I have these resources to help me. I am developing a positive view about myself, who I am. And finally, I can learn skills to deal with all the social interactions, such as problem solving, both in school and out. So the I have, I am, I can. And I'm going to show you some examples. She never went very far with this except to describe the model. But I've been working on this model for, since we started writing the book 2 years ago, working on the model in terms of fleshing it out beyond just these 3 words. So in terms of teachers, the strategy 1 in terms of I have is to build strong relationships with newcomers and their families so that they know they have this resource around them to help them grow and succeed. That they're not alone in the world, they're not isolated or an island in the world. There are others out there to help them. The power of the narrative is the I am, and how the narrative can help you develop your strengths. And finally, the I can is to build problem-based models of instruction, how they can solve problems in their lives. So first is the I have. And I have a number of pictures up here related to this. So I want to start with, there is someone in the International Reading Association, the Journal of Adolescent and Adult Literacy. She didn't know that she was working on the I have, but she developed a program of using a number of migration narratives, both in children's literature and in other stories, to help them understand their own narrative of the I have, how I built relationships, how coming, relocating from my home country into my new country, and what I have to help support me. The 6-word memoir, that's Trina saw that in Nara, and so there's a story behind it, and I'm not the story. Ernest Hemingway is the story, so let me tell you about Ernest. The story goes, and I'm not sure if it's true or not, because if it is, I wish I had that piece of paper. It'd be very valuable. Hemingway was sitting at a bar in Key West, Florida, where he lived, and he was very, very drunk. And the bartender said to him, "You're Ernest Hemingway." "Yeah, right." "Yeah, well, if you're Ernest Hemingway, can you write a memoir in 6 words? And he got a piece of paper and he wrote, baby shoes, never use, for sale, never use. Let me say it again because I always mix up those 2 lines. Baby shoes, for sale, never worn. And so that became idea of developing the 6-word memoir, which you've been asked to do about the conference, and thinking about the 6 words that characterize your experiences here and what you've learned, but also can be used with your students about understanding about what they have in their lives. So if it's a true story, somebody has that piece of paper somewhere, and he's probably a multimillionaire because Hemingway wrote it on a napkin at the bar. Anyhow, so the 6-word memoir. So you have migration narratives for what you have, 6-word memoirs. I've been looking at and thinking about the morning meeting, which can happen at any time during the day in a classroom, in which before you start instruction, you gather your learners together and you spend about 5 or 10 minutes just having them talk about whatever they'd like to talk about, because you don't know what happened on their way to your class. Maybe they missed the train, maybe they forgot their work, maybe they had an argument with their child or their spouse, maybe they got up late and had to really rush to get dressed to come to school, and so all of that's hanging in their heads before you actually learn. So I have this community that I can openly, or not, I can listen to others talk about what they faced before they came to school, or I can talk about it. I can get that off my chest. Usually the morning meeting has been done really in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, but it doesn't mean it can't be done all across the board to have a meeting. There is one thing that I actually saw, which I connected to I Have, this map, in a session that I went to in Portland, Oregon, with an organization called LESLA, Students with Interrupted Formal Education that are adult learners. There's an international organization called LESLA. And one of the teachers talked about putting up butcher paper in her room and having them create a map. And on the map was all the resources they had available to them in their community here in the United States at the time, and also their community where they used to live, and looking at how over time they added to their map in the community in the United States, so that I have these resources that I could tap into. The last one is that that body. One of the teachers in Columbus tried out the I Have, I Am, I Can model, and she had newcomers in her high school do collages on the 3 different bodies of I Have, I Am, I Can, with few words, but a lot of pictures. So they cut and pasted pictures, and then they described what they had and who they are and what they can do. Another thing that I've seen just recently, it comes from the Teacher to Teacher website, and I've seen it a lot in other places. This teacher called it a de-stress. I'm not sure I wanted to put a hyphen in there, but I just left it the way she had it. A de-stress corner. When you're feeling a lot of stress, here's a corner in my room you can go to, and you can de-stress for a little while. And developing a place in your room where somebody can cool down is a great idea. And maybe it's just a quiet little place. Maybe it has music. Maybe it has a rug. Maybe it has, less lighting, whatever. A de-stress corner. So I have that in my room. And I could use that too. We could all use one of these in our lives, a de-stress corner. This is a scattergram, and I thank Mary Soto at Cal State East Bay for this. She used this with her high school students when she was teaching high school about what they had now, they put above the line, and what they hope to have soon, they put below the line. And so they had a scattergram, which would be something based on mathematics, but they use it for different things that they were hoping to develop over time. And so to move something from below the line to above the line was kind of both visual and tactile to show that I've made progress. Okay, so the I Am. This one really resonated with me a tremendous amount. And although Edith Grotberg, the originator of this, talked only about writing the narrative, I saw it in a million different ways. So they could develop a narrative, obviously, which is what she thought about, reflective writing about who you are, and have your students do this at periods in the time they're with you, and then gather it all together and let them see their progress of who they are. They can do a visual narrative, a drawing or individual or a group mural. I love butcher block paper, and I love using it and working with it. I have a big roll in my house that when family come to visit, I roll it out on the patio, put crayons and paints, and let everybody go to it. And then the visual narrative, using photography or photo voice, photography and speaking, or a video. And those tell wonderful stories of who you are. And you can start with your ancestors, you can start with who you are right now, depends. Okay, so the next ones are a little bit out of the box. So the I am, can you create a menu about yourself? Who am I? Okay. Am I a croissant? Am I scrambled eggs? And who you are. So that's another one you can use, and you can use that with all ages. And you can do a menu for the whole day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or just one meal. A memo to yourself, who I am, and that also teaches memo writing, which my husband tells me he spent a lot of time when he worked at the New York Stock Exchange training people how to write memos. So start early with your students. Advice column, you know, Dear Abby, but Dear Momoko, write to yourself. Okay, so here's a whole bunch of ideas for I am. Then, the I can. And if you were with me yesterday, you know that I actually adore picture books to the point of almost insanity. And I will set this out. Somebody said to tell everybody, and maybe somebody will, Allison Nomoto told me that. Everywhere I go, I invite people to come to California. I live in San Ramon, California. I have about at least 100 picture books, maybe more. I'm filling my office at home so much that I may have to move out, just leave the books there. But if you're ever in California and you feel like looking at picture books, and you can email me or call me on the phone. I'd be happy to give you my phone number. And you can come over. I'll make you a cup of tea. And we'll look at some cookies, and we'll look at lots of picture books. I see such relevance in picture books and the value of them and how they can be used in many, many ways. And I found a soulmate in Allison Nomoto who had a gazillion picture books as well, and we share them in Sendai. So here are some. There are 3 books by this author. I just put up 2, Quest and Journey, and they're wordless picture books about problem solving and how I can. The Circuit is a real favorite of mine. It was written by Dr. Francisco Jimenez, who's a retired professor from Santa Clara University. And he was brought across the border as a little boy from Mexico with his mother and father and his older brother, Roberto. And they worked the circuit. They picked from March to end of October. They didn't go to school any of that time. And then at the end of October and November, they went to school until March when they started picking again. And he was at one point, ICE came into his school and picked him up and took him across the border back to Mexico. And then he came back again. And somewhere along the line, even though he had 5-6 months of school over time, he went to a Jesuit school, and the priest there saw something special in him and helped him to fill in the gaps and learn and succeed. And he faced the I can constantly for years and years before he became a professor. He lives in Santa Clara. He still talks about this. He's written 4 books. From the Circuit was the first. And he just finished the 4th one about a year and a half ago, about his life coming totally to, to fruition. And he talks about the people that helped him along the way and wishing that he knew where they were and how he could tell them how they helped him succeed. So he's a really great model for I Can. Dear World is about succeeding in the world. Enrique's journey is very much like the story of Ricardo. But it's based on an LA Times news writer who followed the path from, I don't remember which country, whether it was Honduras, Nicaragua, El Salvador, and she rode on the top of a train through Mexico and across the border into the United States, and she described her journey and the challenges in her journey. So this literature is really helpful. Arrival is also a wordless book. It's a huge, huge, heavy book, with tons of pictures of different people who have made a journey to a better life. So those are all great pieces that you can use for I Can. The next slide shows you, seeing how I'm doing on time. Okay, I'm good. The next slide shows you writing narratives for migration, and these are two books that were based in the literature project from the Journal of Adolescent and Adult Literacy from 2015 by a teacher who wrote about how she used this kind of literature for helping the learner. So they wrote migration narratives, and they used a lot of authentic literature, picture books. They wrote about their own experiences, including in narrative text and maybe drawing in comic strip frames, which I think are a great way to begin writing. I mean, when you think of the Disney doing all his work in frames like that and telling stories and, you know, encouraging your students to do the same and build that learning. And you can connect it to learning about your world history, geography, literature, art, in your culture, so you can make lots of connections. Okay, so that's the I have, I am, I can. And then finally, thinking about growth mindset, because thinking, you know, Grotberg started just with I have, I am, I can, but it all kind of, lots of it fits together. And so building that idea of a, you know, growth mindset, that I am an intelligent person, I have skills, I have ability, that I can actively evolve and I can develop, kind of like my dad telling me, you're alive, you've made it, and you can continue. And children with a growth mindset have that belief of their intelligence and their skills, and they can develop. So this next piece was based on some work by Dr. Paul Miller, We Need to Do Better. So students who have a growth mindset, they welcome challenges. That doesn't mean if you give them a 1,500-word paper, they're going to go, wow, I can't wait to write that. But they also have the idea that, you know, that this is a challenge, okay, there are negatives and positives, but I'm ready to, you know, to face it. And they anticipate obstacles. And I know that I'll get something good out of this because of my effort. I'm ready for your criticism and your feedback because I know it will help me grow. And to let others encourage you. The other thing about a growth mindset is something actually I face when I've done teacher training, is that teachers with a growth mindset are ready to try new things. The others that I've encountered, I always call the I have a closet teacher. And when I've met these teachers, they say, but you know, I have a closet full of materials, and I've always done things this way. And why do you want me to change? And so maybe those are the people you may not be able to change, or maybe by baby steps you can help them to change, that always doing something in a certain way may not really continue to produce growth. So, you know, so you want to really help teachers reach that growth mindset too, and get them out of the I have a closet, which is my personal concern for teachers. Okay, so you want to teach growth mindset with children's literature to help them grow and change and to learn new skills. And so here are some books, again, on perseverance, flexible thinking, multiple perspectives, and kindness. And so these are a few I mentioned yesterday as well. One that's new is Humpty Dumpty Fell Off the Wall. And so how did Humpty Dumpty put himself together again? And so how did he develop a growth mindset? One Green Apple is a story of a girl in her first week of school, and she can think about everything they're doing when they go to a farm in her native language, which we read in English, but she can't communicate, but she has the mindset that she will eventually be able to. And I talked about Ish yesterday, about having confidence in yourself as an artist. I Am Peace, which is a book of mindfulness. The Invisible Boy Who Wants to Become Uninvisible. Wait, is that a word? Uninvisible. And these girls who faced the challenge of not being able to try on shoes in a shoe store in the South, and what they did to face that challenge in creating their own shoe store. These are all, you know, the growth mindset or possible things. These books are all in my home, so if you're coming, we can don't forget, cookies, a tea, and we can look. Okay, and 3 more pieces, and I'm just almost ready to end. So a growth mindset looks at perseverance. This is a real story about a boy in Ghana who was missing part of his leg, but he was able to ride 400 miles across Ghana in 2001. A disability is not an inability. A flexible thinking about the 2 little girls in my new shoes, and this book really threw me a curve. I knew a lot about the civil rights movement. I had relatives in Norfolk, Virginia, and going from New York to Norfolk was like a real eye-opener, but I never knew anything about the idea that they couldn't try on shoes in a shoe store and had to put their feet on paper and an outline drawn for them to really pick out a pair of shoes. So the owner of the shoe store would take that outline, cut it out, and then match it up to shoes, and they had to take the shoes he gave them. And it's based on a true story. I'm trying to remember the professor at Boise State who I met and talked about this book with. He does a lot of book reviews. I can't remember his name. His first name is Stan, but I don't remember his last name. But he does a lot. He's also a picture book lover, and we kind of connected. Multiple perspectives. Well, the jelly donut experience and the jelly donut difference. What kind of jelly donut do you like and what kind do I like? And can we live together because we have different jelly donut desires and so forth? Or you put mustard on your French fries and I put ketchup, or I put, vinegar. Can we work together? Okay, and finally, let's come to conclusion. I think I'm just about ready here. Building internal resilience, and even for yourself when you think of it, everyone has a circle of mastery, things that they can do, things that they can succeed in. But beyond that, I called it the grit point. The original author called it the wall. I am not using that word ever. And so the grit point is where you go from your mastery into your circle of growth. And we all face that. And sharing that with your students about how you are growing and how you hope they will grow is really a really big, important thing to think about in terms of building resilience. We're all going to have obstacles one way or another in our lives. And how do we go into that circle of growth and grow as a person? So with that, thank you very much. If you're interested in a lot of picture books, Brenda Custodio and I have put a lot of picture books on our website that kind of works and kind of doesn't at times, but if you are really interested, please take a look, and if there's anything you're interested in that I might have, make sure you let me know, and I'll share it with you. And again, the offer still stands, cookies and tea and picture books. Thank you.